This is a broadcast from the Pop Cult Pod.
Broadcasting from an undisclosed location in Ireland, known as the Pop Cult Compound, where the craze for film, television, video games, and much, much more. A proud part of the Phoenix Wrestling Network comes the Pop Cult Pod, the only podcast with an actual cult following, hosted by your cult leader, Tompott.
Yes, he is I, and I am him, Tompott of the Pop Cult Pod, and we're back, the rebel of the Phoenix Podcasting Network. I've said it before, I will say it again, I will keep taking titles until somebody stops me. Speaking of gravelly voices, we weren't actually, but hey, I had a gravelly voice last week, so that's why I didn't record last week, just a bit under the weather, wanted to wait until I had those silky, dulcet tones back. And speaking of gravelly voices, because we actually are talking about gravelly voices now, my special guest, who I've been teasing since the very beginning, is here. Don't say anything. If we have time at the end, you can come on. I should have said who he was from the beginning, I guess, because that might have got a few more listeners. The Undertaker's here. I just held for applause there, as I assume you did. But yeah, maybe we'll have a bit of time for him at the end of the show. But it is a big show. I didn't do the thing I normally do, which is, well, it's a big show. Let's get on to the news.
Not just news. Not just new news. But the new.
That's right, we're not getting on to the news. We're getting on to the new news, which is clearly 3 times better than the regular news. And we're starting off with a lot of DC news coming our way. The last episode we talked about casting for Matt Reeves' Batman, which was Zoe Kravitz Catwoman, Paul Dano as the Riddler. And we have got a lot more since. Andy Serkis is confirmed to be playing Alfred, which is a pretty out-of-the-box choice, in my opinion, but Andy Serkis is a very good actor. It's just, you never really look at him and think, oh, Alfred, but I could totally see him if they kind of, slick back his hair or something. He could totally work. That's confirmed, by the way. It was rumoured, but I believe Matt Reeves has confirmed that. The next bit of news, though, is a big casting thing that came out pretty much, I think, the exact same day as the Andy Serkis news, but it has not been confirmed as far as I know, and that is that Colin Farrell is apparently going to be playing the Penguin, which is odd, I think. I mean, like, hey, we get a sexy penguin, I guess. Like, well, I mean, we've had a sexy penguin before, like Danny DeVito, am I right, ladies? And gentlemen, I suppose. Yeah, it's an odd choice, because obviously when we picture the Penguin, we picture kind of an overweight kind of mobster, but I don't think it needs to go that way, really. When you look at the defining characteristics of the Penguin, unless you look at the Tim Burton one where he was just an outcast and a freak, but that's basically just every Tim Burton character. Colin Farrell could totally work as that. He's a great actor. I would have much preferred if they had him as Constantine if they did a DC movie someday, but he could totally work as the Penguin. I could see that. Quite an ensemble they're putting together here, but that's not all. The only casting we got. We also got John Turturro, probably best known as Jesus in The Big Lebowski, and pretty much a load of other stuff, a load of Coen Brothers movies. He's going to be playing Carmine Falcone, which is basically one of the big name mobsters in Gotham. I believe he was in Batman Begins. Tom Wilkerson, I think his name was, that played him. But yeah, he's a mobster. But now what all this points to, or seemingly confirms, is that this is an adaptation of The Long Halloween, because The Long Halloween did have a lot of these characters, and Carmine Falcone was fairly pivotal to it. And that would totally work. I can definitely see that as being, the inspiration for this movie, which is very exciting, very interesting. Apparently, the only other rumor I heard about recently was that Arkham, at one point when Ben Affleck was making the movie, Arkham seemed to be quite pivotal to the plot. Now it's not that big a part, but it is in the movie apparently. But take that for what it's worth. This movie's still a while away, and we'll probably get some more casting. We're all waiting and expecting casting for Harvey Dent at the moment, because that's the rumor. Is that's basically the last big role they have to cast. They also cast an unknown. I can't even remember her name. I think she came from Juilliard. I don't even think she has many acting credits for a significant female role. There was some suggestion that it was going to be for Batgirl, because of course we had the casting of Jim Gordon last week. So yeah, this is really coming together. There was rumours that they were looking at Matthew McConaughey for Harvey Dent. I don't buy that for a second. He's too, this is presumably not a period piece, but this is a young Batman. It doesn't make sense to have Harvey Dent be as old as Matthew McConaughey is. But anyway, moving on. A lot of other DC news, and this really only came to the front as I was getting ready to record this episode, so details are a bit scarce, take them for what it's worth. But I believe Variety put out a massive report about some updates on some DC properties. First of all, they talked about Superman and the uncertainty of Superman. What the hell is going on with the Man of Steel? So they've said, first of all, any Superman movie is unlikely to hit before 2023. There's no director attached, no script. They have spoken to J.J. Abrams about Superman. Now, if you are a fan of comic book movie history, a long, long time ago, J.J. Abrams was going to make a Superman movie. I believe it was called Superman Flyby. This was a long, long time ago, before J.J. Abrams was the J.J. Abrams we know now. He signed a massive deal with Warner Bros. It was through Bad Robot. So I could definitely see him getting him in as something of an advisory capacity for the DC universe or something like that. I think you could probably tempt him into directing Superman. But what's also interesting is the report says, and we'd heard before what this rumor, that Michael B. Jordan pitched a version of Superman to Warner Brothers. Now, if you cast your mind back to when Henry Cavill, oh my god, I'm all over the place today. Henry Cavill left the Superman role, or was, seemingly done with Superman. He didn't leave the role, as we'll get to in a sec. There was talks that they wanted to make a Superman movie, and they were eyeing up Michael B. Jordan. Now, the report also says that Michael B. Jordan couldn't commit to the part because it's so far down the road. He's got other projects he's committed to, which would all seemingly point to the fact that we're not getting a Superman movie anytime soon, and that he's not a priority, which is a little bit disappointing. It's kind of strange how badly they've messed up this Superman. Now, speaking of Henry Cavill, during the week, he came out and said that he's still Superman. He's still committed to the role. So we really have no idea what the hell is going on here. But it doesn't look like there's any plans for Superman, so I guess none of it really matters. Other things in the report, for one, they say that Birds of Prey is R-rated. We basically knew that if you saw any of the trailers. There's a lot of indications of blood and all that kind of thing. And if you some of the leaked plots and that kind of thing. But they say that Suicide Squad is likely to be R-rated as well. Now, what is interesting about this, obviously DC and Warner just put out Joker, which was R-rated, and is set to very likely be their highest grossing film ever under the DC label. And that's R-rated. So really, this isn't a hindrance anymore, having an R-rated superhero movie. And when we look at it, the only competition as far as putting out superhero movies now are, Marvel. I guess you could say Sony with their Spider-Man movies, but, come on. On a big level, it's Marvel. Marvel aren't going to put out R-rated stuff, I don't think. At least, maybe possibly a Deadpool. I don't think they're going to do it with any other character or any other movie, though. So this is one way they could really distinguish from the competition, and if they get the right character and the right movie, I don't see why not. I think Suicide Squad as an R rating totally works. Birds of Prey, yeah, I could see that too. So, interesting stuff. I do wonder whether this is the direction DC are going to be going more and more, or if it's just kind of they're using it for niche movies to draw people back in. I don't know, it's hard to tell. Although, on the other hand, Harley Quinn is in both those movies, so maybe they want to be consistent with that character. It would be weird if it was just like R rating. Oh, no, she's not cursing at all. What the hell? But I don't know. Also, things that we kind of knew. The Flash movie can't start till 2021 at the very least. I mean, this movie's been a train wreck for a long, long time. I don't know what's going on with it. Last we'd heard, at one point, Grant Morrison was trying to write a script with Ezra Miller and the director at the time, I think, which was John Francis and whatever Daly, the guys who did Game Night, were directing it, and they had differing approaches to the script. And basically, he was going to write the script, and it was going to be one or the other. And now, since then, Andy Muschietti, who directed it, and Christina Hodson, who wrote Bumblebee, are working on a new draft of The Flash. So when we heard it sound like Ezra Miller could be gone, he's not gone, I guess. They're still committed to making a Flash movie. It can't start till at least 2021 because he's going to be working on Fantastic Beasts 3. like, yeah, I don't know what's going on with this movie. I don't know if we're ever going to see it, what's happening with it. It's gone through a crazy amount of writers and directors, so we will see. Also, in early 2021, Aquaman 2 is going to get ready. We talked a bit about that before. Seems like it's still a very far... It's really, really far away, surprisingly. Considering how big a success Aquaman is, they really are going to presumably wait until 2022 to get this movie out. 4 years is a long time, which is a bit surprising, but they are working on a spin-off called The Trench. No real details on that. Although, by the time that gets ready to go, it's going to be quite close to Aquaman 2, so I don't entirely know if it's necessary, but I think that kind of confirms what a lot of us thought, that it's not really a movie we need. We got a lot of details, on the other hand, and this isn't from the report, this is from kind of bits and pieces, The Rock is kind of on press junkets at the moment. We heard a lot about Black Adam. First of all, the release date, The Rock said on Instagram, is December 22nd, 2021. So, what, about 2 years. Which would mean it would have to get work going on it pretty quickly, but, we'll see. By the time this movie comes out, The Rock will have been attached to this character for, nearly a decade. Which is insane. Again, we will see. The Rock's very busy. I don't think he can really hang around if this movie has issues, which some of these DC movies have. But he did put up some cool artwork, which was a Jim Lee drawing and also kind of touched up by Boss Logic. If you want to check that out, it gives a good idea of what we're going to get. It basically looks like any bit of fan art. No offense to either of those guys. But we did get other details about who's going to be in the movie. For one, it's going to have ISIS. I'm just leaving that hang there for a minute. So you can be like, ISIS? Not the terrorist organization. Although I guess if you really wanted to, you could now say that The Rock loves ISIS, because Isis is the Egyptian goddess and Black Adam's wife. She has flight and telekinesis. I think often that comes from an amulet. Yeah, it's interesting to see where they're going to go with this. I don't think they're going to make, obviously, Black Adam to be kind of a villain. The Rock doesn't really do villains that much anymore. Or maybe, did he ever? I don't know. I was trying to think way back to was The Rock ever a villain? I mean, he was that really crappy CJ Scorpion King, if that counts. So, I think they're just going to make him an anti-hero, and then eventually, presumably, he's going to meet Shazam if we get another Shazam movie, which we should. Do you know what? That's pretty much all I have to say on Isis, except when I was looking up a few details about her, I came across this, which sounds horrible. She was in Legends of Tomorrow, apparently. So the Legends of Tomorrow version is portrayed as a wisecracking Muslim American hacker from the future with wind powers from an amulet and no superhero codename. That sounds terrible. But that's not the only thing that's already been introduced in Legends of Tomorrow that we're going to see in Black Adam. The Justice Society of America are confirmed for this movie. Now, you're saying, what? If you don't know who the Justice Society of America are, let me try to give a quick crash course. So, these guys are old school. These are way before the Justice League. This is the first superhero team ever in comic books. To run off a few of the members of it: Dr. Fate, Hourman, the Spectre, the Sandman, the Atom, the Flash, Green Lantern, and Hawkman were the founding members. Now, you're saying, oh well, I recognize a few of those characters. Here's the thing, like I said, this was golden age of comics. So, you might recognize Sandman, you might recognize Atom, the Flash, or Green Lantern. These are all the first versions of these characters. It wouldn't be until the Silver Age where we got the kind of characters we recognize. So, for example, Green Lantern, a lot of people think Hal Jordan. But in Justice Society of America, the first Green Lantern was Alan Scott. The Flash, we know mostly, and in the Silver Age, was Barry Allen. Back then, it was Jay Garrick. The Atom, Al Pratt back then. Now, we often call him Ray Palmer. The Sandman is kind of a different one. Obviously, Neil Gaiman took that character, made him into Morpheus, Dream, whatever you want to call him. But the point is that a lot of these characters sort of preceded other versions of these characters in the universe. Basically, DC at the time decided to make Justice League based off Justice Society of America and update a few of these characters, and they put the more modern versions of these characters. So your Barry Allens, your Hal Jordans. Now, eventually, they would do Flash of Two Worlds in the comics, which is where Jay Garrick and Barry Allen met. And again, obviously, this kind of introduced multiverses and eventually became Crisis on Infinite Earths, which CW were doing. So that was a big, long circle that probably made no sense to you. But, what I'm trying to say is that this is a great thing for the movie. I think it'll get a lot of people invested. We'd long heard rumours about particularly Dr. Fate and Hawkman being in the movie. I don't think we're going to get all those members of the Justice Society of America. For quite a few reasons. It would be overstuffed, for one. B, people will be like, wait, Justice Society of America, what's this have to, is this something to do with the Justice League? And also, I think, like, if you put in Flash and Green Lantern, it's like, wait, is this like, people will just get confused, I think. So I don't know. I think they might take out some of the more well-known characters there. I think they can put in some of these characters. I don't think you're going to see Sandman. I would assume, like looking at, presumably this movie is set a long, long time ago in the past, so some of these characters, I don't know if they would fully fit in there. But regardless, could mean some good things for Black Adam movie, if it presumably will get going. The Rock seems determined, but he's always seems determined. Whether or not that means we're going to get it, who knows? But one thing that we may or may not get, because this is like the worst story in a long time, because it isn't really a story, but it became a story. This is what bad journalism gets you, okay? So, a Joker sequel, right? As we were talking a minute ago about how successful Joker was, we're going to get a sequel, I would imagine. Just makes sense. It's the most profitable comic book movie of all time. Made a crap load of money. But here's what happened, okay? So, they put out an article. I think it was maybe the Hollywood Reporter. Said Todd Phillips is in talks for a Joker sequel to write and direct. It looked very certain that was going to happen, and apparently he went to Warner Brothers and asked for the rights to other DC characters, and after a bit of a battle he got at least the rights to one. He's expected to make almost $100 million off the first Joker movie, and he had a high price tag for a sequel that Warner Brothers were expected to meet. That's what we got, and it was like, hey, apparently Joaquin Phoenix has definitely come back. That came out. We had about 2 or 3 variations on this story within less than 24 hours. Okay, so then it comes out. Yeah. Obviously they're going to do a sequel. Very likely. I mean, no shit. Probably will happen. The story of him going to Warner Bros. To pitch a dark origin story for DC characters is a total lie. And he has no intention of overseeing these. But there has been talk of a DC Black Label when Joker began. So this got to a point where no one knew what the hell was going on. That Todd Phillips had to come out and say, look, there was no meeting. I had no intention of producing a slate like this. Him and his company, which is, I think it's called Joint Productions or something. Him and Bradley Cooper have it. Only ever have 2 films in the works at a time. Now, I don't know if that's entirely true either. But I know he's working on a Hulk Hogan movie. Wrestling. While there has been some loose talk about more Joker, there's no contracts, and we've never approached Joaquin with an idea. So saying that there's going to be a sequel is anticipatory at best. So there's your story. I mean, the story is basically, is there a Joker sequel? We don't know. Maybe someday. And it went back and forth. And what's worse about this is, sometimes people will just take the first story, and now everyone thinks there's a Joker sequel coming. So, very, very likely there will be. But who knows? As far as making dark origins of these other DC characters, I would be surprised if they didn't do it, given the success of this one. There has been talk of a Lex Luthor one, which I think could actually work. There's a really great graphic novel, I think Brian Azzarello wrote it, called, I think it's Lex Luthor Man of Steel, although I believe they've re-released it and changed the name or something. That's just a comic from Lex Luthor's point of view. That would be great. But again, who knows what the hell is going on with this? We might get a sequel. We might not get a sequel. And speaking of a sequel, we may or may not get, because it seems like we were going to get it before, and now everything's changed again. That was an amazing segue. Did you hear that? All those lines got me to this story, which is about a line long. Noah Hawley is going to write and direct Star Trek 4. There we go. The transition was longer than the story. Noah Hawley, of course, probably best known for Fargo and Legion. Really talented guy. He was at one point going to make a Doctor Doom movie when Fox was still going. He's making Star Trek 4. Now, Star Trek 4 at one point was going to be directed by S.J. Clarkson, and the whole thing seemed to fall apart because it looked like they were going to bring in like a time travel element, and Chris Hemsworth was going to be in it because in the first Star Trek film he was Kirk's father. And costs got too high. The cast wanted, I think, was the pay raises, or they wanted them to read a certain demand, and those weren't met. And because of that, it looks like it's fallen apart. So I don't know. Is this just going to be the same issue? Is it just going to be a new script and the cast are going to be like, hey, you need to pay us this much, and they're like, no. I don't know. Obviously, Paramount wants to keep the cost of this down because, like, there's an article there. I think it is the Hollywood Reporter again, the Heat Vision blog, which is talking about Star Trek and Star Trek as a film franchise, and it kind of basically confirms what we were all thinking, which is that Star Trek is never going to be Star Wars as far as box office goes. It's never going to be another Marvel. Like, when you look at even the most successful Star Trek films, some of them, were back in the day when it was at its height, but now it can't really compete in the age of massive, big budget sci-fi films. Like, there's already Star Trek on TV that's catering to some people's demands already. But also, these are just really expensive. Now, Star Trek movies have been cheaper than they should be. They've always come in well under 200 million. And, like, they want to keep the cost down because these don't make that much money. So, what does that mean for another Star Trek movie? Are they going to be able to get the cast back? Is this movie going to be very small and self-contained? Is that why they pick Noah Hawley, who would generally be working in TV? We don't know. We're assuming it's going to happen at some point. Obviously, Star Trek as a film franchise won't die. They'll keep trying to crack this code. But really, the key to these movies having succeeded in recent memory has been to not really make them Star Trek, which is obviously the biggest criticism thrown at the J.J. Abrams films, was that they were more like Star Wars, and we saw how that turned out for him. And when they did something that was a bit closer to Star Trek with the more recent one, Star Trek Beyond, it didn't succeed financially. So I don't know what this is going to involve, but obviously they're going to keep trying to crack this until they can get it right, but I just don't exactly know what they're hoping for. Speaking of, other franchises, we have the polar opposite of Star Trek, which is, of course, Marvel. And Disney in general have made a lot of changes in the last few days as far as dates. Of course, Disney inherited Fox's slate when they merged them. Now, I will say, generally speaking, a lot of the Fox films that have come out haven't succeeded very well. And maybe that was because of Disney's marketing, I don't know. But for one, we'll start off with the Marvel stuff. So they've dated 5 more Marvel movies for 2022 and 2023. October 7th, 2022. February 17th, 2023. May 5th, 2023. July 28th, 2023. And November 3rd, 2023. I think I named 5 there. So presumably this is the start of Phase 5, because Phase 4 I believe is ending in 2021 with Thor Love and Thunder. There we go. I believe is the end of Phase 4. So this would be Phase 5. It looks like all these years now are going to have four Marvel movies a year. And I believe we already had the other 2 dates in 2022, one of which is May 2022 has Black Panther, and the other one is... Actually, sorry, there was 3 more dates in 2022. So the one that was announced was October 7th, 2022. The May of that year we have Black Panther. We have an unnamed film for February 18th, 2022. And we have another film July 29th, 2022. So what is going in all these slots is the big question everyone has. Because with these 8 films, the only one that we know for sure in any of these slots is Black Panther. Movies we know that are in the works: Guardians 3, Ant-Man 3, Blade, Captain Marvel 2, Deadpool, something involving the mutants, Fantastic Four. Actually, all the things I named, that's 7, and there's 7 slots. I'm not going to say that's all of them, obviously. I would imagine Guardians 3 is taking one of those slots. I would say very likely to be the earliest slot there, which would be in February 2022. Possibly. Because, of course, I think James Gunn is getting to work on that as soon as Suicide Squad is done. So that could really be... It could be that film. I could imagine Guardians 3 being ready. Ant-Man 3 is already at work, I'd say that'll probably be... Let's see, what do we have left? Probably July 2022. They've had that slot. They've had that kind of slot for Ant-Man in general. It'll have been 4 years since Ant-Man and the Wasp. There's a lot of talk that might include the Young Avengers, but who knows? As far as what else we have, Blade, Captain Marvel 2, Deadpool, something involving the mutants, and Fantastic Four. I think any of those projects could slip in after that, in the following year even. But it's hard to call. You know, we're still obviously very far removed. I mean, there's even a very outside possibility that one of the 2023 slots could be taken by a sequel to a movie that hasn't come out yet. Probably unlikely. But, you know, it doesn't really matter. It's so far away. And we eventually get more details for these movies. A lot of Marvel stuff, obviously. And you would also imagine that we're probably going to get another Spider-Man movie from Sony squeezed in there. But who knows, it probably won't be in the Marvel universe at that point. So anyway, that's what we're looking at. A lot more Marvel stuff to come. But again, as I said, Disney dated not just Marvel stuff. They also dated some Star Wars stuff. And there's a project coming in 2022 that we're apparently going to learn about in January. And that there's already a director attached. Now, they said it's not Rian Johnson's film. So who knows what it could be. I mean, the Kevin Feige produced film is what a lot of people are suggesting. I think that's the one that makes the most sense. But that's just because we don't really know what's going on with Star Wars right now. There's obviously going to be a bit of a lull in Star Wars stuff after Rise of the Skywalker. Another thing of note is that this film that's coming out in 2022, Kathleen Kennedy, who is the head of Lucasfilm, might not even be around by the time that film comes out because her contract is up in 2021. Kathleen Kennedy was appointed to Star Wars, I believe, before George Lucas had left. So whether or not she sticks around after, I don't know. A lot of people have been saying Star Wars is in shambles. Kathleen Kennedy is being fired, but they've been saying that forever. So who knows? It'll be interesting to see where it goes. What's also interesting, and this just might be a case of them holding the dates, is that the films that Benioff and Weiss are working on and have now, you know, left or been fired or whatever the story is, they're still on the schedule. I don't know if that means I'm going to get someone else to work on them. Maybe they won't happen at all. Maybe they're just holding places. I don't know. What's very interesting about this slate they revealed is the sheer amount of Fox properties on it. It's insane. So there are 15 Fox movies coming out next year. 3 of them from Fox Searchlight. That's more, by the way, than they're putting out under the Disney label. It's madness. There's 10 Fox films coming in 2021, 8 in 2022, and 7 in 2023. Some of these don't have names. A lot of them could drop off. Who knows? It's interesting. We could speculate on them. You know, maybe they're reboots of Fox franchises that they now own. It's really too early to tell. We don't really have anything to go on here. It could be anything. Now, what was obviously another thing they've inherited is the animation slate from Fox. And a lot of delays, a lot of movement here. First one is... this is a really weird case. Okay, so it's a film called Ron's Gone Wrong. And this is from a UK-based animation studio called Locksmith Animation. Okay? Now, why I say this is weird is Locksmith Animation have never made a movie. This is a new production company. This is their first project. I believe some of the people involved used to be involved with Aardman, who made Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep, obviously. But they have already been through 4 of the 5 major studios. Okay, so they started off at Paramount. That was they had a picture deal at Paramount. That ended. They went to Fox with Blue Sky Animation. Obviously, Disney acquired Fox. And after this is over, they're going to Warner Brothers. So, I'm not entirely sure where this movie is in its development. At the moment, it's been delayed 3 months. The movie Ron's Gone Wrong is coming out February 6, 2021. How committed can Disney be to this if this is a massive hit? They're just running over to Warner Bros. So I don't know. It depends how far along this is. They have not released an animation thing at the moment from Blue Sky Animation. I think they have Spies in Disguise as the only one on the slate at the moment. That's definitely coming out. They haven't announced anything beyond that. The plot of Ron's Gone Wrong, if you care to hear it, it's set in a world where talking, digitally connected bots have become children's best friends. Ron's Gone Wrong tells the story of an 11-year-old boy who finds that his robot buddy doesn't quite work. So that's that. Sounds like it could be sweet, but who knows what's happening with it. The only studio they haven't been in is Sony. This Locksmith Animation, who've never made a film, but somehow have been in 4 of the 5 major studios in Hollywood. The other movie that a lot of people freaked out about was Bob's Burgers, because it was unceremoniously absent from this schedule of movies when it was meant to be coming out next year. So people freaked out. What's happening with the Bob's Burgers movie? Ah! And in the most Belcher thing possible, if you're a fan of Bob's Burgers, Disney just forgot about it. They were just like, oh yeah, sorry, we forgot we had a movie. Let's put that there. Yeah, it's still coming out, right? So this movie, this Bob's Burgers movie, is apparently still coming out to cinemas in July of next year, July 17th. I thought it was possible they pulled it from its slate and it was going up on Disney Plus, but apparently it's still making a theatrical release. They just forgot that they have it. Imagine being such a big studio, having so many movies that you just forget you have an animated movie coming out in like 8 months. Oh yeah, we just forgot about it. I never want to hear ever again that Disney has their shit together. And I'll get to another point in that, actually. Another film that I have as under Blue Sky Animation, again, we don't entirely know what's going on with it because it's now been delayed quite a lot, is Nimona. This is based on the Noel Stevenson graphic novel, which is incredibly acclaimed. I have it over there somewhere on my bookshelf, and I've never read it. But I've heard it's very good. A lot of people are looking forward to it, very excited for it. It's been delayed from March of 2021 to January of 2022. This was originally meant to come out in February next year. I have no idea what's going on with it. I don't know how much work they've done on it. But it's seemingly constantly delayed and pushed back, which is a shame. Because a lot of people are looking forward to it. This is like the big casualty of the animated films from Disney right now. One of the most baffling ones, and this is me, actually maybe even the next two examples, are further proof that Disney doesn't necessarily have their shit together. The King's Man. I think it was only the last episode, certainly in the last month, we talked about a new trailer for The King's Man. This is the prequel to The King's Man, set during World War One. They put out a trailer for it about a month ago, and they've now delayed it until September of next year. It was originally coming out in February. What the hell are they doing there? Why would you put out a trailer and then delay a movie for 7 months? Insane. This movie must be nearly done. Did they have it's February. I can't imagine there was that much big competition in February. It's not a good look. Any hype for this movie is now gone. They'll have to build it up again. Yeah, it was at the point where it was 2.5 months from release. So it would have started to have to build up hype. Why did they put out a trailer? This is ironically the only example I could think of some studio has done this was Fox. When they had Dark Phoenix, they put out a trailer that got a decent amount of hype, and then the next day they were like, "Hey, we're delaying this." Oh God, I hope Disney haven't inherited some of Fox's problems. Seems they have, but one Fox problem they've definitely inherited, ladies and gentlemen, drumroll, the most anticipated movie of all time. New Mutants has a release date. This is not a drill. 3rd of April next year. Put it in your calendars. It's coming. We're finally getting it. The New Mutants that are going to be old mutants by the time this movie comes out. Why are they even pretending at this point? Is there any chance this movie is making it to cinemas? I don't even... It's been so long, I can't even remember when it was meant to come out. Oh, I don't know. New Mutants is I hope New Mutants never comes out. I hope they always act like it's coming out, and then it's like, oh no. I hope they're like, New Mutants out in April, then they delay it to September. And then when it comes up September, it's like, oh, well, next April. Oh, the New Mutants. What a shame. Speaking of delays for franchises in trouble, I mean, I guess the X-Men franchise isn't in trouble, it's dead. Godzilla vs. Kong has been delayed in probably the least surprising delay I can ever think about. Because, first of all, we had Godzilla King of the Monsters came out this year, which was a major financial disappointment. I didn't like the movie personally. I know some people did quite like it. But regardless of what you think of it, it did not do well box office wise. And possibly hurt the potential for a franchise with this MonsterVerse that they're trying to build. So they've delayed this because originally it was coming out in March. and now it's coming out in November. Because how anyone would ever have thought that this movie was coming out in March, I have no idea, because we haven't seen a picture. We haven't heard anything. I would imagine it's going to go through some reshoots as well. It would be shocking if it wasn't, because, yeah, like, no one ever thought this was coming out in March, right? If you were genuinely looking forward to this in March, like, without any reason, you should have just been like, why have I not seen anything about this? Why have I not heard anything about this? It's because they were never going to release it in March. I don't think anyone expected it to come out in March. But now, yeah, 20th November 2020. Hopefully this means they can get it right and get this MonsterVerse back on track. Because, like, I mean, look, it's not that hard to just get some good monster fights in there, you know? Just get that right. One of the things that did work in Godzilla King of Monsters was some of the monster fights, so... But then again, I'm pretty sure I looked at the cast list for Godzilla vs. Kong, and, like, the amount of human characters in it, you're like, oh, they're going to give us some family drama again, aren't they? What a shame. Alright. We have another story here about potential franchises. And it's actually, what's more interesting about this is the subtext of the story. So, first of all, these are both Wes Craven properties. First of all, Scream 5 is apparently in the works, in very early development, I think that is what was said, at Spyglass Media or / Lantern Entertainment. Basically, this is a company that bought all the assets from the Weinstein Company when Harvey Weinstein was a total monster. And they basically own all the rights to a lot of these properties, a lot of the Dimension stuff, one of which is Scream. So they're working on a Scream 5, and the rumour is they want the original cast back. Now, what is very good, obviously, about Scream is that it's a very meta franchise. It could probably easily do something about, like we kind of had the Halloween reboot, that kind of thing. It could work on that sort of meta awareness of, we're bringing back the original cast, and oh yeah, this is a soft reboot. I kind of get the feeling, though, they did that with Scream 4. I can't fully remember Scream 4. I don't know. Obviously, they just had the Scream TV series, which was a different canon. But I would imagine they're going to try to get the original cast back, if nothing else. Look, I'm all game for this. I really like Scream movies. If they can find the right angle to take, why not? It's also, comes with the unfortunate footnote that this is going to be the only Scream movie not directed by Wes Craven because he's passed on. So that's kind of a shame. But another Wes Craven property, probably more iconic one, is in a very interesting place. Now, this is a story that actually broke in about 2 months ago. I think it was in September. I was going to actually mention it on the show, but it was just such a minor thing that I was like, I'll leave it off. And the news story 2 months ago was that the rights to A Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger have reverted back to Wes Craven's estate. And the news now is that they're actively taking pitches for new Nightmare projects, including a feature film and a possible HBO Max series. So look, that's one of my favorite slasher franchises, one of my favorite slasher villains, Freddy Krueger. Obviously, with the way things are going, I think you could very easily make another Nightmare movie. I think it would really work to bring him back now. With all the look, obviously, I keep referring to Halloween, but I think a lot of studios are going to try that approach of a soft reboot, which brings back some of the original cast, selective continuity. I think you can do that with Freddy Krueger. Bring back is it Heather Langenkamp? It would really work. I would love if you could get Robert Englund, but obviously he's getting up there. But now, what I meant a minute ago when I said the interesting story here is in the subtext, is how they got the rights back. So I have alluded to in the past, I believe, the rights of, and not Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th. And there was a big debate about Friday the 13th because Friday the 13th was written as a work for hire, which meant that the producer, I think it was Sean Cunningham maybe, who produced the movie, hired a writer to make Friday the 13th. And after a certain amount of time, a writer can claim back the rights to their property. Which means that the original writer of Friday the 13th, whose name I'm blanking on right now, I think it's something Cummins maybe, I'm not sure, has taken back the rights to Friday the 13th. Sorry, Victor Miller. Where did I get comments from? He saw this law and got the rights back to the first Friday the 13th, but the producer of the series has got the rights of other stuff. Now, I will admit that it's also the case that I believe this only applies to the rights of Friday the 13th in the US. But what that technically means is that he could make a Friday the 13th movie, but he could only use the things from the first Friday the 13th. Now, if you're a fan of Friday the 13th, for example, you'll know that Jason isn't really a factor in the first Friday the 13th. It's Jason's mother. There's no hockey mask, no machete. Not really. But it establishes Camp Crystal Lake, Jason Voorhees and the mother. So it could, in theory, mean that you could have two competing Friday the 13th franchises. One with hockey-wielding machete guy, who never came from Crystal Lake and is not named Jason. And another one that has Jason Voorhees, has Camp Crystal Lake, but he doesn't have the hockey mask, and he's kind of just a lumbering zombie child. Which is interesting. But the reason I bring all that up is because that was kind of a big shock to a lot of people, and it brought awareness to the fact that writers of certain properties under law, after 35 years, can try to take back their property. Now, that's what's happened with A Nightmare on Elm Street. But what is more interesting, this is the subtext I'm talking about, is that certain properties from the 80s are likely going to revert to the original owners. So, for example, I have an article up here that is the Hollywood Reporter. I've said their name 3 times now. I swear, I think all these stories are from Hollywood Reporter. It's not the website I use. I use loads of different websites for sources, but this is just how it's played out. Gary K. Wolfe, who wrote Who Framed Roger Rabbit, he should be able to get the rights back to his thing. He's looking to terminate the rights. Obviously, you have to submit paperwork, and Disney, going to court with Disney isn't going to be fun. The heirs of the Beetlejuice screenwriter Michael McDowell aim to do the same thing for the script of the 1988 Warner Bros. Film. Again, a few years to go. Die Hard is based on a book called Nothing Lasts Forever. The rights of that may well reverse as well. Predator, that could go soon. They actually mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street. This is before this was going on. So like I said, this was kind of well known for a while. With authors like Stephen King and David Mamet also on the warpath, it says here, hoping to get rights back after 35 years. So, if you know a franchise from the 80s that really, started off as from a book, as an original screenplay, the rights to that could very well revert around this time, which is really, really interesting. I don't know what'll come of it. Maybe it'll mean nothing. I don't know if it's really interesting because of the precedent it sets. Where, if nothing else, forget about 80s franchise going into the 90s. Some of those rights will be going back, and I wonder what it means for some. There probably is some very big franchises that could be affected by this. I don't know. Regardless, they're also talking about the Terminator franchise. Does anyone want the Terminator franchise rights at this point? I don't know. Alright. We have one last story. I'm not going to... I do a minute-long meltdown normally at the end of the news. I'm not going to do it today. There wasn't much that got me angry. This kind of did. But I want to talk about it in detail. I want to talk about it for more than a minute. Okay, look, we were talking about, films coming out in 2020. Here's a film coming out in November 2020. Finding Jack. Here's a plot of Finding Jack. I say a short plot, but it's actually quite a long plot. After losing his young family in a tragic accident, Fletcher Carson joins the flagging war effort in Vietnam. Deeply depressed, he plans to die in the war. But during one of his early missions, Fletcher rescues a critically wounded yellow lab, whom he nurses back to health and names Jack. As Fletcher and Jack patrol and survive the forests of Vietnam, Fletcher slowly regains the will to live. At the end of the war, the US government announces that due to the cost of withdrawal, all US dogs serving in the war have been declared surplus military equipment and will not be transported home. For the hundreds of dog handlers throughout Vietnam, whose dogs had saved countless lives, the news is greeted with shock and disbelief. For Fletcher, he knows that if he abandons Jack, then he too will be lost. Ordered to leave Jack behind, he refuses, and so begins their journey. That's a long synopsis. That's from the back of a book called Finding Jack, which they're making a movie about. Sounds like a feel-good movie, right? One for animal lovers. It's based on the real thing about dogs left in Vietnam. That's not really news, though, is it? Here's why this is news. And you might figure out why. You might have heard of this, because it was a huge story last while. They've made an interesting casting choice here. For the secondary lead role of a character named Rogan, they have cast James Dean, whose film career is seemingly still alive despite the fact he's dead. Has been for 65 years by the time this film comes out. James Dean died at 24 years old, so chances are he would have been dead by now anyway. Like, if you go off average life expectancy of an American man, he would be 89, he'd probably be dead. This is genuine. They've cast James Dean. Directors Anton Ernst and Tati Golek, I probably got their names wrong, I don't care if I did, have acquired the rights from Dean's family. The family earn about $5 million a year, by the way, from using James Dean's likeness. And you might say, who the hell are they? Because James Dean was an only child, his mother died young, he was 24, he didn't have kids or a significant other. These are two cousins on the actor's father's side who are apparently just milking James Dean's likeness for money. Obviously never met him. Really have nothing to do with him. I guess that's how it works, like, but seems kind of shady, and I think all this stuff will indicate why. They plan on using actual footage and photos to create a realistic CGI version of James Dean. Another actor will voice him. The director had this to say: "We searched high and low for the perfect character to portray the role of Rogan, which has some extremely complex character arcs. And after months of research, we decided on James Dean. We feel very honoured that his family supports us and will take every precaution to ensure that his legacy as one of the most epic film stars to date is kept firmly intact. The family views this as his fourth movie, a movie he never got to make. We do not intend to let his fans down." You heard that right. If you didn't know that, James Dean has 3 film credits to his name. Most of the other stuff, he was a background extra. He's made 3 films, and all of those films, he was lauded for an amazing performance. This isn't about just about James Dean, by the way. We will get to this and the worrying issues this sets. So, yeah, this news came out, and it caused such a shitstorm, the director had to come out. He was saddened and confused, and he never intended for this to be a marketing gimmick. And he said this: "I think they would have wanted their family's members' legacy to live on. That's what we've done here as well. We've brought a whole new generation of film goers to be aware of James Dean. At the end of the day, what we really want people to know is the movie's about love and friendship. The veterans that served in the Vietnam War, and especially the dogs that were with them. We never want to lose that emphasis, and this social media reaction becomes a distraction of what the story is about." No. Do you know what becomes a big distraction? When you cast a long dead actor in your movie. By the way, I've tried to look up this movie. I don't think anyone else has been cast. I don't know if this movie is happening. I have no idea what the hell this is about. Okay? And I know you might say, hey, well, they brought back Peter Cushing. They brought, they had that role for Princess Leia in Rogue One. Actually, both of those were in Rogue One. The difference here is that they use computer graphics to bring back a character that actor had already played. Now, I'm not saying that's okay, but it's somewhat understandable. Obviously, there are characters that these actors embody that they're going to need to do. Now, one thing I will say, if you haven't seen Doctor Sleep, there's characters in that movie that were in the original Shining that they got new actors to do, and their performances are fantastic. No one's like, hey, that doesn't look like Shelley Duvall. They're like, oh, I see what we're doing. And it's a good performance. Do that. If you really had to. For new character. For old characters, for established characters. For someone like James Dean, who obviously gave a shit about his acting, craft, And these two cousins that are just milking their dead cousin dry have said, yeah, put him in the movie. Like, you have someone doing a voice impression anyway. So it's not James Dean. What, like, it's baffling. And what's worrying about this is that you really wonder, as all these mega franchises are going, like, a lot of these rights, I'd imagine, are going to remain with film companies. Like, talking about something like Marvel, let's say at some point down the road, one of the Avengers dies in real life. Like, are they going to CGI one of them, bring him back to life? Because that's a really weird precedent to set. Owning the likeness of actors. Now, look, they've brought back dead actors before for advertising. That's obviously not cool. It's just the shady world of families owning the rights. And whatever about selling a product, that's which is really weird and shady. Bringing an actor back to life digitally for a role as big as this, which, by the way, the reason I said I haven't heard anything about this movie as well is that if it's done well, it's going to be expensive. If it's not done well, it's going to look awful, which I imagine will look weird anyway. Like, this isn't a major studio doing this, you know? It's disgusting. It's disrespectful, disgraceful. It's not right. Like, I don't know. But again, the problem with, like, especially with celebrities that die young, and from that era of Hollywood that was kind of idolized, they are going to become symbols more than people who acted, who had a craft. But it's really messed up. And what was even more, like, upsetting is that this is not the end of this. Because in the wake of all this, a new massive company called Worldwide XR was formed that owns the right to over 400 dead celebrities. Their CEO, Travis Cloyd, said influencers will come and go, but legends will never die. And their intention is to use these for film projects and virtual reality. Honestly, I feel like this is a topic I should cover someday, because it's a really shady practice. And I would recommend you go to the website, Worldwide XR, because it is pretty freaking weird. I mean, aside from the fact that Worldwide XR sounds like such a, like, cover, it sounds like a fake name you come up if you were a Bond villain. So let's just go through. I'm on Worldwide XR now. I know I'm going well off the beaten path here. This episode's probably going to run, like, way too long, so sorry about that, Undertaker. We'll have to try squeeze you next week. So, you go onto the site and you're welcomed by dead celebrities with quotes obviously taken well out of context. So, we have the first one, James Dean, and it says, let's see what James Dean has to say here. I'm sure this is exactly what I intended. If man can bridge the gap between life and death, if he can live on after he's dead, then maybe he was a great man. Right. I'm pretty sure that in 1955, which is when I think he died in 1955, he probably wasn't talking about being digitally brought back to life. Obviously he wasn't. Could you imagine, like, the technology he had then versus the technology we have now? He obviously meant living on to his craft, the legacy he left behind, not being brought back by some shady business pricks that want to put him in a movie. You know, who else do they have here on their website? Jackie Robinson, the first African American to play in the Major League Baseball. A life is not important except in the impact it has on other lives. He did have a massive impact on other lives. And now you're going to bring him back. Way, hey, brilliant. I'm looking through. It's so weird. They have a section here called Rights. And it's like going through a catalogue. It is the spookiest shit ever. Okay? Worldwide XR and CMG Worldwide work together to provide access to a stunning array of personalities and brands. Aaliyah, young musician that was taken advantage of by R. Kelly and died tragically at a young age. Amelia Earhart, Andre the Giant, wrestling. If you haven't noticed, I've taken to doing that now. Anytime I mention something to do with wrestling, I'm just going to say wrestling instead of making a big thing about it. Arthur Ashe, Bart Starr, Betty Davis, Betty Page. Apparently you can get the rights to the Beverly Hills Shield, which is a sign in Beverly Hills, which is kind of weird. Buddy Rich, Christopher Reeve, Chuck Berry, Dizzy Gillespie, Ingrid Bergman, Jackie Robinson, James Dean, Jimmy Stewart, Lou Gehrig, Malcolm X. Imagine you can use Malcolm X in your adverts. Maya Angelou, Neil Armstrong, Rosa Parks. Jesus Christ. I'm pretty sure I read something before someone used Rosa Parks to sell cars. Like, that's despicable. What's even more messed up is when you click on this, right? When you go into the rights, there's like subheadings. So at the moment I have it under all, but you can change it to African American icon. That's right. I'm sure they'd do you a good deal if you take 2 or 3 of them. Ridiculous. This is. The worst thing about this is we always knew this was going to happen. I don't know. I guess that wasn't the minute long meltdown. That was like a month long meltdown. The way I went on. Oh wow, baffling story. I'm interested to see how it plays out, but I'm worried about the precedent it sets. Instead of minute long meltdown, I'm going to introduce a new segment. So here it is. Get ready for. You're the one that I watch. Few things in this world are perfect, man. But that theme. So the one that I watched, that's what this segment is. Had something like it before, and it was kind of just going through what's coming out, which isn't very exciting. But it's just talking about some things I'm watching, some things I'm going to watch. And right off the bat, the segment's a lie, because it won't always be something I watch. Sometimes it might be something I'm playing. And it'll probably be more than one thing on many occasions. But I do want to highlight a few things. The Cork Film Festival has just passed us by. And I saw quite a few films there. I saw 4 films over a weekend. Now, Frozen 2, I've done a review on the YouTube channel Pop Called Pod, which I'd never mention on the podcast really enough, is where you should check out my review for that. Full thoughts, obviously that's in cinemas at the moment. The other stuff I saw isn't in cinemas, and I don't believe some of it's going to be in cinemas for a while. So the first thing I saw was Jojo Rabbit, Taika Waititi's newest film, which has been controversial. It's comedy based in Nazi Germany. I'm going to only give vague thoughts about the films because I might talk about them in more detail at the end of the year in a bit of a roundup. This is one of the funniest films I've seen in a long time. And obviously the controversy people are saying, that it like makes light of the Nazis. I really don't think it does. It can be an uncomfortable watch at times that you are laughing so much at a film about Nazis, and sometimes, the humor comes from how ridiculous they were and how awful their policies were. So I think really it's not getting laughs out of Nazis, or it's not, some people say it's humanizing Nazis. I think it's more like, how ridiculous is it that this is what they believed in? And I know people might say that's an uncomfortable message to put out there, and I kind of understand what they mean. But, look, we all know Nazis were bad. I don't think there's anyone out there. Well, obviously there is people out there, unfortunately. But my point is, you can laugh at the movie and not think, these Nazis were normal people. Because, there was regular life there. And we see it through the eyes of a child. And that really should tell you more than anything. Because, the child is a bit dogmatic about, Nazi policies. And he kind of learns over the course of the film how ridiculous that is. And obviously seeing it through the eyes of a child makes you realise how stupid these policies were and how ridiculous it was that people went along with them. But we can't just say, it's an oversimplification to say, everyone there was bad and that will never happen again. Because as soon as you think that, it will. So I don't know. I don't know why I'm getting political. But my point is, this is a really funny movie. The cast is fantastic. Very well acted. One of the funniest films I've seen in cinemas in a long time. Certainly probably the funniest film I've seen this year. The kid, I've forgotten his name. One of the best child performances maybe I've ever seen. He's fantastic in it. Taika Waititi as Hitler. Again, very uncomfortable at times. But he's fantastic in it. I will also say, as much as we're applauding as a comedy, there is moments where you're like, oh, God, the horror of this. And there's one moment in particular that was such a gut punch. One of the most I guess you call it a twist, I've seen in the cinema this year. So I really like Jojo Rabbit. I'm not sure when it's getting released here. I thought it was like maybe February. I'm not entirely sure. I'll look it up just for case. And when I say here, I mean Ireland. I know at one point there was people listening from outside of Ireland, in which case I believe Jojo Rabbit is already out there. I don't see a release date here. 3rd of January apparently. So yeah, not that far away really. The other film I saw the next night was The Lighthouse. This is the new Robert Eggers film. Now, I should say this straight away. I talked about this a bit on Twitter. And it blew up because I mentioned Robert Pattinson. So shout out to all the Robert Pattinson fans out there who are absolutely lovely, actually. I know we kind of have a perception in our head that if someone is a major fan of someone, they can be psycho. That is certainly not the case for Robert Pattinson fans. They were all totally lovely, which is great. And that's one of the main reasons I wanted to talk about the movie on the podcast. Normally I wouldn't, but I wanted to give some of my own thoughts on the film so they could hear them, because they said they would be interested in hearing what I have to say on it. I don't want to say how much I loved it, because I want to eventually, at the end of the year, do my favourite films of the year. But this is certainly one of them. If you didn't like The Witch because it was a bit too slow and a bit too serious, I think that addresses these complaints. What is so surprising about this movie is how little is concerned with being this big artsy film, which is surprising because from the outside looking in, it is a black and white film shot in a kind of a 4:3 aspect ratio. And as soon as you hear that, you're like, ugh, this is going to be a pretentious art film. But this is a film that is oftentimes incredibly disgusting, that has more farts in it than any lowbrow comedy I've seen in a long time. So it's incredibly surprising in that regard. Now, as a black and white film, it looks absolutely gorgeous. The cinematography in this is quite simple but incredibly effective. There's shots in this movie that have just stuck with me. There's one shot especially towards the end of the film that I can't even say, but when they were filming it, I was just thinking how the hell do you do that? Because and something so simple, but it's so effective, and that is what this is. It's in some ways a very simple film, but an incredibly effective one. The basic plot is just two men in a lighthouse, kind of losing their grasp of sanity, and that's how the film feels. The aspect ratio makes it feel a bit, that you're kind of trapped, and that's what's gorgeous. It's kind of like a nightmare. I feels like a sort of David Lynchian kind of film. The performances, as we were talking about, Willem Dafoe, I mean, one of the best actors around. This is maybe his best performance, in my opinion. Obviously I haven't seen every film he's done. He's so crotchety, but he's got a real sourness to the performance, but he just really commits to it and it works. He's a really interesting character. And I will say in general, the performances in this and the dialogue in this are fantastic. It's obviously written in a very kind of Mariner kind of a way. This is set a long time ago. Robert Pattinson, a shout out to the R-Pats fans. He is talk about a guy who's just been knocking expectations out of the park. My perception of Rob Pattinson completely changed when I saw Good Time a couple of years back. This is an outstanding performance, from both of them. And what's really good is that it starts off very simple in their performance and slowly descends into such a dark, twisted portrayal of these men. It really was so just fantastic as far as I'm concerned. Both of their performances are just untouchable. And the film in general is just great. Everyone's calling it a horror film. I don't think it's a horror film. I think it's one of those films that is almost truly original in that it's hard to put it in one box. It's psychotic, a very surrealist film. What I found really surprising about it was how funny it was, though. Especially the way it's edited. There's scenes where you're like, oh god, it's about to kick off, and oh my god. Like I said, even things like the farting, which is such a crazy thing. that works in this film, but is quite funny. It's a film that's so unconcerned with being like, being like a high level art piece, but in its own way is such a work of art. That's a very confusing sentence, but what I'm saying is real art shouldn't be concerned about being or looking artistic. It just is, and that's what this is. It takes a lot of inspiration from mythology, especially the myth of Prometheus was one that I picked up on quite a bit. But it feels like one of those films that when you watch it, you can pick up all sorts of different things and different interpretations, and there is things about it that are certainly open to interpretation. I honestly, I can't wait to see it again when it comes out in cinemas, which I believe it does at the end of January in Ireland. Yeah, this is a fantastic film. I've gushed about it enough. I'll talk about it in more detail, believe it or not, at the end of the year when I do my year-end roundup on YouTube, which I'll probably do my favourite films of the year or something to that effect, where I'll talk about things maybe I didn't review fully in video reviews on YouTube. Another film I saw, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. This is a French film, which basically I knew nothing about this film. I'd heard it did well out of Cannes. I didn't hear anything else about it. I just went into a completely blank, which is a great thing to do with them. Obviously, Lighthouse and Jojo Rabbit I knew quite a bit going into, but this I knew very little about it. And what I found, first of all, it's a great film, very well acted, it looked beautiful. It's one of those films again that has a very simple kind of environment. What should be a very basic film is so effectively done. Like it speaks more and more that like people always kind of rubbish cinematography in low budget films, and it's such a nonsense when you see it so well done in these movies. And it starts off basically with this woman who is a painter. She goes to this woman in France who's set to be, actually I don't even know if she is in France, I'm not sure. I think it's in France. Okay, well, like they're speaking French, but I'm not sure if she actually arrives in France, but that's neither here nor there. And she's a painter, and this woman is going to be getting married to a man in Italy, and she's meant to paint her portrait, but the woman doesn't want to pose for a portrait, and that's kind of how it goes. So she's sort of painting in secret. I can't really say much beyond that. Now, I'm not entirely sure talking about this film is awkward for a couple of reasons. For one, I haven't looked at the marketing for this. I've seen one poster that they've released, I believe, in America, that kind of gave away a little bit about the movie. Not in a major spoilery way, but only because if I give that away, that's kind of the whole movie. Not that it's a major spoiler. I will say this is a movie about romance. And the other thing I will say is that as much as I like the movie, as much as it was well acted, as much as I love the characters, and it was a very interesting film, it goes in a sort of way that you expect. And I think you probably put it together yourself when you think it's a French independent film with female leads. And if your mind jumped to a certain thing there, then yeah. Which is fine, but it just felt a little bit expected, but it was very, very well done. Great movie. Overall, that's kind of all I'll say about it. I've really, this one that I watched thing is becoming a big long segment in itself. I saw Knives Out yesterday, Ryan Johnson's new film. I think it's just about to get released here. Actually, Portrait of a Lady on Fire is coming out at the end of February in Ireland, if you care to see it. Knives Out, I really, really like this film as well. Very well written, very funny, fantastic cast. A little bit long. It's a murder mystery. Of course, with any murder mystery, you're trying to think ahead. You're thinking, oh, was this it, this it? And thankfully, as much as I thought I had the film figured out, it goes about it in such a clever way that I don't entirely know how you could figure it out. Like we find out who's responsible for the death, as it were, like about a third of the way into the movie, maybe, which is a fantastic idea because it kind of takes that element of suspense out of it. But now it's the mystery surrounding the mystery. Very, very funny. Very well acted. I do want to see it again. Definitely worth seeing. Again, maybe a little bit long. That's the only thing I would take away from it. Actually, speaking of the Lighthouse, I should say this. As much as I love the Lighthouse, just to say this is not for everyone, I was at Frozen 2, which was the last one I saw at the film festival, and someone behind me was talking about the film festival. I overheard them say like, "Oh, I was here for last night. Oh, what did you say? Oh, I saw the Lighthouse. Oh, one of the worst films I've ever seen." So different strokes for different folks. Personally, I loved it, but not everyone will, I guess. Last thing I want to talk about is the Mandalorian, which started airing on Disney Plus. I've seen the first 3 episodes legally, certainly. If any authorities are listening, 3 episodes of this have aired now. First episode, I was a bit let down by the first episode because you kind of hear the hype machine is, oh, this is amazing, this is the best thing about Star Wars ever, and oh boy, and it was fine, it was okay. Second episode really picked up. I really enjoyed the third episode. It's not as dark as I kind of hoped. It's maybe a PG, which is a bit disappointing. It just kind of lacks that grit, but I do like this world. I like that we're seeing different corners of it. I'm enjoying it quite a bit so far. So yeah, if you're a fan of Star Wars, I don't see why you wouldn't like it. It is very Star Warsy, but it also doesn't feel too familiar, which is great. If you can check it out legally, there are kind of grey areas to watch it. I don't mean pirating in that regard, if you wanted to watch it. And of course, there's Werner Herzog. I nearly went by without doing a Werner Herzog impression. By the way, I'm officially saying this now. I've asked him, he said it's okay. I know he's a big fan of the show. Werner Herzog is the official mascot of the Pop Cult Pod, because he keeps popping up and stuff I like. He's been Rick and Morty, Parks and Rec, now the Mandalorian. He's a massive wrestling fan, apparently. He was talking about modern myths and legend, and he said WrestleMania is the equivalent of that in modern times, which is amazing. That this old German director is like, WrestleMania. Well, I should do it. My Werner Herzog. I've been really working on it. I literally watched Grizzly Man the other week, just because they're like, oh, is it okay? Is my impression okay? Is this worth doing? Is this worth committing to this pointless accent? This impression that no one will ever ask you for. Werner Herzog, ladies and gentlemen. Bounty hunting is a dangerous profession. Wouldn't you agree? Okay, that was okay. I've done better. Let's try something from Grizzly Man. He's actually a lot more German in Grizzly Man, to be honest. But I'll give it a go. Timothy Treadwell wanted to be with the bears. Ladies and gentlemen, Werner Herzog. Alright, that's enough nonsense. One that I watched will probably return, depending if I feel like I have something interesting to say. Obviously, I had the film festival, took up a lot of the time there. But generally, I will try to stick to one thing coming out, or one thing that I want to talk about. And again, it depends on, timing of the show and such, because this show is already longer than I wanted it to be. So, on to trailers.
This is the theme for trailer.
This is the theme for trailer. This is the theme for trailer trash. Get in the bin.
Get in the bin.
Few things in this world are perfect. Trailer trash. Fair few trailers came out. Interesting ones. First off, we had the Sonic trailer. Of course, the last time we had a Sonic trailer, the big talk was that Sonic's design was awful. Rightfully so. It was really, really dreadful. But they've changed it to basically make him a lot more like his video game counterpart. Is it too late to change the rest of the movie? Sonic looks great. The rest of the movie, not so much. Sonic is an alien. That's definite now. It looks fine. Jim Carrey looks kind of fun. I can't say it makes me want to see the movie anymore, though, which is kind of a shame, because they finally did what, people were hoping for, which was give us a decent Sonic design, and they did. Apparently it only cost them $5 million to do that, by the way. And it's looks like it's in service of a movie that's not great. And I don't know if people are going to see it even with a great Sonic design. So that is what it is. Now, there's a lot of people suggesting that the bad design they put out was intentional for publicity, which, you know what? I normally don't buy into those kind of Hollywood conspiracy theories, but I could totally see that. That actually makes a bit of sense, to be honest. If they just put a bad design out there, because now people know of a Sonic movie. And for $5 million? I don't know. So it's coming out in February. I don't think it looks great. I'll probably see it. Why not? But yeah, not a great trailer. Thankfully they changed the design. It's nice that they listened to the fans, but I don't know if it's in service of a very good movie. Another movie with weird CGI, and I think this one would take a hell of a lot more than 5 million to fix, is Cats. Of course, when the first trailer came out, it was the laughing stock of the internet. Pretty well, rightfully so. It's this weird CGI fur. I warned people about this way before when the description was announced. I was like, this is going to be a mess. And look at it. It's like celebrities with weird CGI fur on them. You can kind of see their face. In some instances it looks good, other instances not very good as far as the blending goes. The set design, it's like they're on massive sets, like they're small cats. It's also incredibly inconsistent scale wise, but then again, I guess you can get away with it because it's a musical and it's fantastic and all that. What's about this trailer is weird is that, first of all, it got a lot less interest, I would say, than the first trailer. Doesn't look any better. I was kind of hoping. Well, I wasn't really hoping. I didn't care, to be honest. The first trailer was just like, oh, it's a work in progress. Closer to release, we'll get it a bit better. And yeah, no, it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look good. So, like, I heard people say, like, somehow they managed to make Idris Elba not be sexy. He looks like a weird vampire cat. At one point, he just disappears in a ball of fur. I don't really know what's going on. Yeah, it doesn't look good. Maybe it'll be a big success. Counter-programming coming into Christmas. People love a big Christmas musical. The big talking point about this is the budget. There was rumours going around that it was $300 million. This is a British production, I believe. Now, I could almost believe that. Just because of building massive physical sets, the amount of talent. I mean, getting Taylor Swift cannot be cheap. CGI fur on every character, that would cost a fair bit. Then again, it doesn't look great, so maybe not. But it is a little bit high, maybe. I don't know. It is somewhat believable. I heard someone else come out and say it's 100 million. That seems way too low, so maybe it's somewhere in the million. Either way, I'd imagine this is quite expensive. And we will have to wait and see if this is, if it was worth the cost, because maybe it'll do well, maybe it won't, I don't know. It's hard to call this one. What is also interesting, and I haven't heard anyone mention this, so I guess put this in the rumour category, but what I've heard is that this movie is cutting it very, very fine as far as being ready. What I've heard at the moment is that it's not going to be ready in time for the deadlines for some of the major award seasons, which is not good, because one of the things this might have had going for it was award season. Tom Hooper, the director, he gets a lot of award love with his musicals. So maybe some of those awards could be off the table. I don't know, we will see. Odd monstrosity that is Cats. That have pity on me, because I'm probably going to end up seeing it by myself and crying at what my life has become. But a movie that put a bit of a smile on my face, certainly, was Soul, the new Pixar film. This is our first trailer for this, so you don't get much of it, which is often the case with Pixar films. Just a basic kind of idea. It's a jazz musician, and he somehow gets separated from his soul. I'm not going to say he dies, because I don't think they'll do that. Although you never know. Pixar can be dark at times. We don't really know what's going on. Just him talking about you got to do what you love, and to him it's playing jazz, and then he falls down a manhole and he gets separated from his soul, and that's kind of it. It's interesting. I think, like, the things they show off in the movie, they're like, from the makers of this and this. They say from the makers of Inside Out, from the makers of Coco. It looks like a good combination of those, to be honest. It's about music and kind of finding your body again, I suppose, which is basically Coco, and the soul, not far off the emotions and the feelings of Inside Out. So it looks like a good combination of that. Not much to say about this trailer, because it is just a teaser trailer. There's a cute part where I think it's Jamie Foxx voices the main soul, the main character, and he meets I think it's Tina Fey, and they're like, "What would you like to be remembered for?" And she's just like does a little cute cowboy dance, and she's like, "That's what I want to be remembered for." But hey, take it for what it's worth. Another kids film we got the trailer for was SpongeBob, Sponge on the Run, which is done in the same animation style as the last SpongeBob movie. Was Sponge Out of Water, was that called? This kind of CGI SpongeBob, which actually looks pretty good. Hasn't lost too much of the essence of what SpongeBob was. I didn't see the last SpongeBob movie. I saw the original SpongeBob movie, which was great. Yeah, it looks fine. I don't know if SpongeBob kind of run its course as far as the humour goes. I didn't get any laughs out of this trailer, which is kind of a shame, because I won't say SpongeBob was very, very funny. And that's not to say this won't be. Probably the main thing that people got out of this trailer is that I nearly said Kanye West. Keanu Reeves is in the trailer. Like he's like a physical, like the way David Hasselhoff was in the rest of the movie. He's like a live action person, and he's like a tumbleweed, and he's like a sage, and his name is Sage, I think. It's just pretty funny. Odd one. We'll see how it turns out. If you like SpongeBob, of course, you'll be happy. I'm sure your kids are going to love it regardless. Another kids movie. A lot of kids movies came out with trailers for whatever reason. Scoob. This is one we talked about in the past, which is a CGI version of Scooby-Doo. They're just calling it Scoob, I guess. First of all, I want to talk about the character designs. Character designs are pretty good. Scooby-Doo looks a little bit weird. He definitely has Scooby-Doo's face, but when he's younger, he looks a little bit odd. Fred looks a little bit strange, but you know, some of these characters are just going to look a little bit different in this form. But for what it is, it looks pretty good. I like the animation, which is positive, because I didn't know how I'd feel about a CGI Scooby-Doo, but it looks pretty good. It is very origin heavy, and I don't think we really needed an origin for Scooby-Doo. Like, it shows us Shaggy and Scooby meeting for the first time and being like, hey, this is how Scooby-Doo got his name, because he's named after Scooby Snacks, not the other way around, okay? Long question answer there. You kind of see Mystery Inc. kind of coming together. It's fine. Now, on the other hand, a few criticisms I have for it. I don't know about the voice acting yet. Some of them just don't sound right. The other thing is doesn't really feel that mystery based, or at least it feels like it's so far removed. Like obviously Scooby-Doo has been around so long. There's been different versions of it, but I always liked Scooby-Doo that was kind of like haunted castles and monsters. But this one has a real sci-fi touch. It doesn't look really mystery focused, which is kind of a shame. But we'll see. It is just a trailer, so I could be wrong there. The other thing is Scooby-Doo talks a lot more in this trailer, which I don't really like. I kind of liked when he was like just doing short words like "roo roo roo Reggie," you know, that kind of stuff. But here he's giving like full lines. He's like, "Wait, that wasn't Rover." And you're like, "Oh Jesus, that's a bit much, isn't it?" Aside from that, though, I mean, it's fine. I think I mentioned before that this is like meant to be a massive Barbara crossover. The trailer ends with them in the ship for Dynamut, Dog Wonder, which I don't really know much about that, to be honest. But yeah, it's going to be a big thing. It just feels like they're trying to do a bit too much with this movie. It's an origin, and it's setting up a whole Hanna-Barbera universe. And it's a sci-fi thing as well. And, you know, it's like, I don't know. Also, Daphne is dressed as Wonder Woman because, you know, it's a Warner Bros. Movie, so corporate synergy. And there's also a bit of a weird joke where she's like, mentions basically that her dad is an alcoholic, I guess. Or not necessarily an alcoholic, I guess. But someone's like, oh, this smells like mustache oil and whiskey. And she's like, oh, is the bag on my dad? And I'm like, this is a bit odd. Anyway, no, it's fine. I'd be interested to see more of this. And just hopefully it's not as broad as it appears. We have two other trailers to discuss, both Blumhouse horror films, or Blumhouse, sorry. First one is also based on a TV series and is surprising. Fantasy Island is before my time. I've only picked up information from it from osmosis, which is that it was like, oh, I wish I had a fantasy where I could be a cowboy, and then you go to this island and they're like, hey, you're a cowboy for a day. And that was kind of it, I think. I knew that was like, God, what was his name? Ricardo Montalban, is that the lead guy? And the other guy was Hervé Villachez. The only reason I know that is because they made a HBO movie about him with Peter Dinklage recently. And all I know about Fantasy Island aside from that was like the little guy was called Tattoo, and he just went, Bosty Plane! And that's it. He's not in this movie anyway, but I think that was like a kind of a fancy comedy, right? This is like a straight up horror. And it looks pretty dark. And it also surprisingly looks kind of good. Which was surprising. You know, TV adaptations are kind of mixed and they don't always do well. I was going to talk about Charlie's Angels this week, which kind of totally underperformed. And Elizabeth Banks had some comments about why it failed, which were a bit, you know, dicey. I think look, we're not going to get into that, to be honest. Like, I left it out for a reason. The Fantasy Island trailer, though, it looks kind of good. It's a very well edited trailer. Set to, I think it's Seven Rings. Is that the Ariana Grande song? Ariana Grande and a TV adaptation, just like Charlie's Angels. Don't bring it up. Right, so this is a good trailer. I found this quite interesting. I want to see more of this. But yeah, like it kind of starts off normal, like wow, you can have your whole fancy, and it gets slowly darker, and I kind of like that. I like a little bit of darkness. So we shall see how it turns out. It's directed by Jeff Wadlow, who I believe directed Kick-Ass 2, which I hated. So give and take. Interested to see where it goes though. And then one movie I am very interested in is The Invisible Man, directed by Lee Winnell, who gave us Upgrade last year, I think it was. And this is, I guess, them again trying to do a dark universe for like the 6th time. And it's gone to Blumhouse now, so it's low budget, which stars Elizabeth Moss as our lead. Now, as I said, I was excited for this movie, and I'm still very excited for this movie, but I would say, if you want to see this movie, I wouldn't watch the trailer. I think the trailer gives entirely too much away. Now, the director has come out and said, oh, it doesn't, don't worry. Kind of felt like it did. Felt like I just saw the whole movie kind of condensed into a trailer. The basic plot, I will go very basic. Obviously, it's The Invisible Man, and as I said, our lead is Elizabeth Moss, so she is not the invisible character. I just realised I can't get away from Elizabeth Banks and Charlie's Angels, so because she's apparently signed on to direct The Invisible Woman today, so I don't entirely know what that's about. But anyway, this Invisible Man obviously is R-rated. It's dark, which I think will at least differentiate it from what they've been trying to do with these dark universe movies. The idea or the story is that she's married to this rich man. I assume he's a scientist, and he seemingly kills himself, suicide. And the deal is like in the will or whatever. It's like you get his inheritance of $5 million on the condition you can stay sane. And naturally, she doesn't think he's dead, and there's an invisible man, and he was an abusive asshole of a man to begin with. So it's like interesting. It's like she's basically attacked under threat from this invisible man. And is she crazy? Is it real? Oh, interesting idea. I like the way they're taking this. I thought Upgrade was a fantastic film. Again, I wish I hadn't seen the trailer because I felt like it gave a bit too much away. But for what it is, pretty interested to see this. Check it out if you want to see it, or if you don't want to get anything spoiled for you, I would say avoid it. I believe it's out in February, so really you don't have long to wait if you are interested in it. But certainly interesting take on these horror films. So those are the trailers. I guess a bit of trailer news. Rumor going around that we're going to get a Black Widow trailer at the start of December, so we shall see if that comes true. But aside from that, we're going to go on to our topic. I've said before what the topic for this week is going to be, which is China's control on pop culture, China's influence on pop culture, film, television, video games. But I do want to talk about what the topic is going to be next episode, which it should be 2 weeks. Because I'd love to hear what people think about this. And next week, is middle of December, around then, will be our Christmas episode, just by virtue of the fact of that it will be the middle of December, and by the time I do another episode after that, it will be after Christmas. It's going to be, I want to settle this debate once and for all. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? So if you have any thoughts on that, let me know. On Twitter, I normally do this at the end of the show, I might as well do it now. Twitter at pop_cult_pod. You can let me know on Instagram, popcultpod, all one word. Email me, because it'd be nice to not get spam for a change. popcultpod@gmail.com. Facebook, Popcult Compound. Or if you have to be at the next Phoenix show, I'll be there. If the episode hasn't come out by then, it probably will have, I don't know. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? I'd love to hear it, yes or no, and why. Definitely let me know. But this topic, we're going to get into China and their impact on the media we consume. And I just want to preface this by saying this is a little bit more political than usual. That was not, intentional. It's just natural when you're discussing a topic like this. It's something I generally try to avoid. I would also say it's one of those things that is such a massive topic. It's tough to tackle in one episode, but I had to because I didn't want this to go over and repeat it multiple times. But my point is, this is a very simplified version of the whole story. And if you want to hear or want to read a really good book on it, one that I found very helpful is a book by, I'm probably going to butcher her name, so sorry if you're listening, Ein Kokas. maybe Ann Kokas, I'm not entirely sure. She wrote a fantastic book called Hollywood Made in China, which was very valuable in tackling this topic, which if you're interested in this topic, check it out. But until then, I guess that is our topic. So we'll see you on the other side. This is China's control and influence on the pop culture we consume.
You're listening to the Pop Cult Pod, and this is a transition.
Hollywood has awoken to a red dawn, and this time it isn't the Russians. This time they're waking the sleeping giant, China. As box office grosses become less dependable and audiences more unpredictable, film, television, and video game studios are embracing China as a massive new source of income. Yet more and more this income is coming with certain caveats. Differing social, political, and moral stands mean that Western companies are having to cater to Eastern demands if they want a decent chunk of profits from an audience that is less inclined to care about the quality of the film and more about the spectacle. Films that have flopped domestically and internationally have fallen back on the Chinese dime, and it's created some rather pressing issues as they become more dependent on money from the Middle Kingdom. And while the world looked on with curiosity from the quirks this resulted in initially, as tensions rise with Hong Kong, box office grosses are falling, the reliance on China is becoming more apparent and more controversial. It's been evident in not just cinema either, but also in gaming, sport, and commerce in general. To look at where perhaps the line has been crossed entirely, we have to look at the surprising example of Chinese censorship, a CGI kids movie about a Yeti. This year, DreamWorks released Abominable, a co-production with Pearl Studio, a Chinese studio formed by DreamWorks with Chinese investors, formerly known as Oriental DreamWorks. The film follows a teenage girl named Yi, who encounters a young Yeti on the roof of her apartment building in Shanghai, names him Everest, and embarks on an epic quest to reunite the magical creature with his family at the highest point on Earth. Along with her mischievous friends Jin and Peng, the trio of friends will have to stay one step ahead of Burnish, a wealthy man intent on capturing the Yeti, and zoologist Dr. Zara to help Everest get home. Which sounds like pretty standard kid fare, right? Maybe with a bit more Chinese influence, sure. But in fact, it is one of the most controversial films to be released in recent memory, from a very specific reason you wouldn't even notice. In fact, people didn't notice it straight away at all. It all comes down to an invisible line, known as the 9-dash line. This is a disputed area in the South China Sea, of which Chinese mapmakers draw a line consisting of 9 to 11 dashes, that include many contested islands, of which, depending on who you ask, they don't have claim to. Now, many tribunals have determined that China does not have any legal basis for claiming the region. In Abominable, a map of China includes a 9-dash line. While catering to Chinese audience is nothing new, this style of inclusion could indicate a new era in Chinese media relations, the pushing of propaganda and political ideology to the Chinese government. Due to the 9-dash line in the film, it has been banned in Vietnam, and after Universal refused to make the cut as requested by other Asian countries, it has also been banned in Malaysia and the Philippines. And while Western audiences have barely reacted, even accepted the scene, or left the scene intact despite it pushing the Chinese worldview, the question then becomes if this sets a dangerous precedent for deepening relations with China in media. In recent times, China has been much more open about the influx of foreign films into their market. What in the 90s was only 10 films from foreign countries a year, grew to 20 in the 2000s and now sits at 34 foreign films allowed. These extra 14 being films that had to be in the 3D or IMAX format, which means, of course, that it massively caters to blockbuster cinema from Hollywood. When this expanded deal was inked, it allowed studios of foreign films to take 25% of the gross instead of the usual 13%, meaning China became a much bigger factor from 2012 on. More so, this deal was meant to be renegotiated in 2017, but due to trade wars and tension, it hasn't been. But that doesn't mean they haven't still surpassed the quota of films in the last 2 years. Because of this, and because of the huge success of big budget blockbusters from the West, we have a bigger presence of Chinese investors and studios in American companies. Legendary Pictures, once known for the Dark Knight trilogy and the Jurassic World movies, are now a subsidiary of the Chinese conglomerate, the Wanda Group. Tencent Pictures, a Chinese production company and distributor, have been involved with Wonder Woman, Venom, Terminator, and Men in Black. They're also involved with Top Gun Maverick, which garnered talk recently when a trailer showed that the Japanese flag and the Taiwanese flag that should be on his jacket had been replaced with generic flags, presumably at the behest of China. China have a long tense relationship with Japan, including in more recent times arguing over ownerships of the Senkaku Islands. With Taiwan, China claims they own Taiwan, despite them splitting from China in 1949. And many massive American companies have agreed to recognise China as the owner of Taiwan, including the 3 largest US airlines. And with Tencent being more involved in Hollywood, this could be a sign of things to come. not just for them, but for other Chinese entertainment companies looking to make American Hollywood, and them having the influence to push their own agenda. Is this even a question of morality? Are we just more judgmental of this because of China's political policies? Can we ever expect a corporate entity to put morals over commercial interests? There's been a history in recent times of placating to China in more subtle ways. For example, Iron Man 3 featured some exclusive Chinese scenes with actors from the country. The villains of the Red Dawn remake were changed from Chinese to North Korean in the hopes of securing a release there. Transformers Age of Extinction was accused of being Chinese propaganda and featured heavy Chinese product placement to the point where, for a time, it was the highest grossing film of all time in the country. And it too featured the help of a Chinese production company. Is this simply the way of the future, and inevitable when such a large potential market becomes a more viable revenue stream? Are we just more dubious as their political or social ideologies don't align with our own? After all, at times we don't notice at all. We only seem to mind when it affects the creative process in an obvious way. Or, as more recent times have indicated, when a company has to portray a certain image that fans may have of them. China is starting to infringe on the actions of the companies that make or distribute our media. Recently, the streaming rights for South Park created a bidding war with the likes of HBO Max, the eventual winner, NBC's upcoming Peacock, Hulu, and the recently launched Apple TV+. South Park recently put out an episode poking fun at the Chinese government, leading to China banning the show. As a result of this, Apple dropped out of bidding, as China is considered a big asset for the manufacture of Apple products, along with having consumers there. And we can argue about whether this is acceptable business practice. Sure, Apple wouldn't want to damage a relationship with any business partner. But when it comes to dealing with the government of a country and upholding their principles, things become a bit morally ambiguous. They're far from the only company placating to China though. Liberate Hong Kong, the revolution of our times. A rallying cry for the people of Hong Kong to take action over a number of issues, many of which stem from their one country, two systems principle they have as part of China, and a call for democratic reforms, which unsurprisingly, China are staunchly against. Blizzard did so far more blatantly and extremely. If you don't know who Blizzard are, you certainly know some of their output, including but not limited to World of Warcraft, Diablo, StarCraft and Overwatch. Yet the controversy stems from another of their games, Hearthstone, a free online card game that's generated over $1 billion for the company. It's so big that there are professional players for the game, and it's a popular esport. At a recent tournament that was streamed, professional player Blitzchung, a Hong Kong resident, in the post-match interview, uttered that slogan, in a mask similar to that worn by the protesters. And the response was rapid. The stream was cut, the player was banned from this and other tournaments for a year, and forfeiture of current prize money, around $4,000. Blizzard pointed to a rule about players not being allowed to offend the public or impugn the company's image. They also terminated the contract of the two interviewers. The common question we must ask now regarding companies, when they make decisions such as this, are there other factors at play, and what is their reasoning for doing it? In Blizzard's case, 12% of their revenues come from the Asian market. Now, of course, this isn't all China, but Activision Blizzard sees China as a prime target for market growth to make up for a fall in users, following the path of many tech giants. Once again, we have the presence of Tencent, who owns a 5% stake in Blizzard. A statement on the Chinese social media platform Weibo seemed to confirm that Blizzard supported the position of the Chinese government. The public response to this has been exceptional. There was criticism of the punishment being disproportionate compared to other bans. Twitter trended with hashtag boycott Blizzard, which many players actively did, along with employees of Blizzard taking action, including walkouts to show they didn't support the actions of their company. And Blizzard has since reduced the ban to 6 months, and they've restored his winnings, while citing that China was not a factor, and it was instead due to the player engaging in political discourse and taking attention away from the game. Their annual BlizzCon event was also heavily protested, at which they accepted some responsibility for the ban. Blizzard also received a letter from the representatives of Congress. And while the controversy has somewhat died down since, it's been an eye-opener for many people about the potential impact and influence China and their government can have on the entertainment we consume. However, watching closely, it's nothing new. In the last 2 years, at least 25 global brands have apologised to China, according to a piece on nextshark.com, and it's become especially common recently. It's a trend that might well continue to grow at an alarming rate, as Chinese companies get more involved with other businesses. For example, going back to Tencent, they have a vast portfolio of Western media. Tencent is the largest video game company in the world, and chances are you haven't even heard of them. They own 100% of Riot Games, who make League of Legends, an 80% stake in Grinding Gear Games, who make Path of Exile, 40% of Epic Games, who make Fortnite, 5% of Ubisoft, and a majority stake in miniclip.com. And that's just naming a few, along with them having connections to the world of TV and film. And this is not to say that a company is evil for doing well or being based in China, of course. In fact, the CEO of Epic Games came out in favour of allowing people to express their opinion on the Hong Kong protests, and said that Fortnite players would face no repercussions for doing so. On the other hand, if they were to crack the whip on some of their studios, as shareholders, who knows if this position would hold? The fact of the matter is that China's influence on especially American cinema is nothing new, nor is censoring a film to score an international release in that territory. In fact, as far back as the 30s, American filmmakers cooperated with Nazi Germany for monetary reasons, and it meant many Hollywood studios agreed not to make films attacking Nazis or their anti-Semitic views. Of course, this was changed during the war. Now, far be it from me to enact Godwin's law and compare everyone to Nazis. But the truth is, Hollywood has long been using the kid gloves when it comes to dealing with the Middle Kingdom, and chances are you didn't notice. These changes are mutually beneficial at times, as China hopes for global cultural dominance and the studios hope for more profits for the burgeoning Chinese market. What's also true is that studios often rely on the cooperation of Chinese companies and government, as it is an incredibly unpredictable environment. China is very protective of their own cultural dominance in the country, and want Chinese films to exist and be seen as superior there too. It's why there has been reports of box office results in countries being misreported so a local film plays better. Appeasing the Chinese government is vital too, as they may change their minds if they are not pleased. For example, Avatar was pulled from cinemas to make way for the Chinese biopic of Confucius, reportedly as Avatar may spark unrest over land disputes due to its themes, while Confucius preached harmony and respect for authority. Django Unchained was pulled from cinemas in China in less than 12 hours for its content. So for studios in America, it makes good financial sense to make a film that won't disrupt Chinese sensibilities too much. The largest cinema chain in the world, AMC, is also 38% owned by a Chinese conglomerate. There's a certain irony in a chain called American Multi-Cinema now being largely owned by a Chinese company, the Wanda Group, who, as I said, are also the owner of Legendary Pictures. Is there ever a possibility that if a film did enrage the Chinese government enough, that the world's largest chain would refuse to show it due to their Chinese partners? There's no clear answer to that, but it's an interesting question that we need to ask as China becomes a bigger factor in the industry. More so to prevent issues such as this, American studios are being pressured to collaborate with Chinese distributors and companies if they want to succeed there. For example, in the past, China would group big American releases together, cannibalizing their box office there. In 2012, The Dark Knight Rises, Prometheus, and The Amazing Spider-Man all shared the same week of release. It is quite evident then that success in China can fluctuate, and that they have to be willing to play ball there. Because the West has failed in the East before. In 2004, Warner Bros. Began putting out DVDs in the market for themselves, Universal, and Paramount, at competitive pricing to combat piracy. And yet, in 2008, they exited due to a lack of success. You can make a lot of money in the Chinese market, but there are a lot of factors going against you, and with some of these factors, it becomes very clear that to succeed, that you have to toe the line and perhaps partner with a Chinese investor. So if you were wondering why Matt Damon was in a film with a mostly Chinese cast in a film called The Great Wall that you probably forgot about already, then that's why. That was also made by the Wanda Group, by the way, who get on very well with the Chinese government. And even that doesn't guarantee success. In that example, the film underperformed. But to give you an idea of the control the government has there and how they can protect those who play by the rules, after poor review scores on Chinese movie review sites, the Communist Party's media outlet criticised sites by name for doing harm to the Chinese movie industry, leading to one of the sites removing the score. There's not many comparisons you can make here, but it would be like if after an American blockbuster got poor reviews, the government went after Rotten Tomatoes and Rotten Tomatoes took their score down. Now you might say that co-productions are removed from the Chinese government and deal with Chinese companies. That, however, is not true. The China Film Co-Production Corporation, CFCC, established in 1979, is state-run, and all imported films go through them. They oversee all co-productions. Any agreements between companies do so with the consent of the CFCC. They are just a subsidiary of the Chinese Film Group Corporation, which is the largest film distributor in China and is state-owned. They've also financed massive hits from American studios such as Furious 7 and 8, Warcraft, along with local hits like The Wandering Earth and The Mermaid. Certain policies they hold are the key to whether a film will get into China as a co-production or not. The former head of the CFCC indicated that certain content needs to be avoided. Sex and violence, but also religious issues, complex political issues involving other nations, and ugly representations of China that do not fully reflect the country's economic growth over the past 30 years. However, the range of reasons why films have been banned or censored in China run the gamut. Back to the Future was banned for containing time travel. Babe Pig in the City was banned as censors had a policy of not showing live-action animals that had the ability to talk. Brad Pitt was reportedly banned for portraying the Dalai Lama. The Dark Knight wasn't released as a singer in the film from Hong Kong had pictures leaked online, and they were worried they would offend Chinese sensibilities. Other topics to avoid are anything to do with ghosts and spirits, dystopian themes, religion, or prophets, and most notably of late, homosexuality. If you were wondering why so much media claims to have LGBT representation in their films after the fact, without any evidence on screen, that's most likely the reason. Sure, Valkyrie and Dumbledore are gay, but don't expect it to make it to the big screen in any significant way if they hope for a Chinese release. Bohemian Rhapsody notoriously seemed to hide away from Freddie Mercury's sexuality, so much so that it secured a release in China after just a minute was cut out. Some films are heavily edited for release, and some films banned from cinemas eventually do get a home release. However, censorship is clearly evident, and in other cases, Hollywood seems more than happy to self-censor or show restraint on topics that might scare away Chinese investment or audiences. Now, there are variations of co-productions, but this is the more simplified version, but the full version is incredibly complicated and almost contradictory, only adding to Hollywood's problems with tackling the Chinese market, hence why it's easier to conform to whatever China's government wants to simplify things. As a reliance builds on China as a market and on the government for access to it, then we could see more appeasement of their policies, possibly even to the point of propaganda. What does all this mean though? Does it even matter? As I've alluded to, China increasing their presence through investments is not exclusive to pop culture. A lot of this stuff could be thought of as inevitable. China has long been a massive global power, and as it turns more to expanding its global reach, certain facets of life will stem from their corporate or governmental influence. For the pop culture we consume, it means as time goes on, that influence may be more explicit. As even more time goes on, it might even be a case that China is no longer a partner, but instead the owner of these multimedia corporations. Entertainment we consume will more often be made in China. And while this is concerning due to certain societal differences and the potential for pushing a worldview we don't necessarily agree with, there are a few truths to ease that concern. While we may cater to China's market, there will be some need for them in this scenario to cater to us. These differences between us mean we live in a society where open discourse and criticism is allowed. So chances are we could talk about why a certain film is bad, or pushes a narrative that may be disagreeable. Meaning we would need to be more ethical consumers of media, which would not be a bad thing in some ways. There have been films made by China that just haven't succeeded internationally, proving that a film adhering to a certain worldview doesn't guarantee cultural significance. China will continue to invest in American entertainment, and American entertainment will often kowtow to China for more money. It's quid pro quo. However, the changing landscape of media, including streaming and the vast amount of content that is produced nowadays, means that global cultural domination is unlikely. Quite simply, it's unpredictable. It heavily rests on the political landscape as well, which is ever shifting. In essence, there is a certain cultural Cold War brewing that hopes to be financially lucrative and socially relevant. Is it that different than what we have already? Are we just more willing to accept certain politics and ideas from a country such as America, since they more align with our own sensibilities? Does the presentation of military in, say, Michael Bay's movies mean that we automatically cheer on the US military and always see them as the good guys in global conflict? Not necessarily. The point is that we can't expect corporations to have morals or business and to put the needs of consumers first. If there's money to be made in China, that's where they'll go. If there's more money to be made by excommunicating them, then they will do that. It is on us, the consumers, to be more aware of the media we consume and ask ourselves the questions of who made it and what their intentions are. In this way, we can both respect free speech and freedom for companies to explore outside investment while preserving independent thought. These are lessons we should be taking in regardless of whether or not China takes its place as a global cultural supplier. Well, there you have it. That was our topic this week. China's impact, effect on pop culture and media we consume. As I said, there's a much more nuanced, well-researched take on that in a book called Hollywood Made in China by Anne Kokos, who's, I'm sorry Anne if I messed your name up, but there you go. That was a really good book if you wanted to check out for more on the topic. Before we go, as always, Phoenix Wrestling Network, that I am a part of. I need to prove that I belong in a game I'm calling.
It's that time of the week where Tompott justifies his place on the Phoenix Wrestling Network.
That's right, I need to prove I belong on the Phoenix Wrestling Network, because saying random celebrities and then saying the word wrestling after them isn't good enough. I need to go to randomcelebritygenerator.com, a site that is exactly what it says it is, and connect a random celebrity to the world of wrestling through film and television. It's like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but with a bit more wrestling. Okay, so I'm on the website, I press it 3 times, I have to know who the actor is as well. That's no good, otherwise I just press it again. Because like one time I think I got like a darts player, and I'm like, well, we're kind of stretching celebrity there. Although you are very random in giving me a darts player. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. I don't know if this one counts. I got Sting from the Police. Now, Sting from the Police actually has an agreement with the actual Sting to be allowed to use the name, I believe. I'm not going to count that though, because that's just weird. So I'll do the next one. Let's see here. John C. Reilly. Okay. John C. Reilly is in Guardians of the Galaxy with Batista. That was a bit simple. But I gave you that little bit of nugget about Sting, didn't I? That would have to do. Alright, well that's our show. As I said, next episode is going to be Die Hard. Let's try settle this. Is this a Christmas movie or not? If you've got any hot takes, let me know. Twitter, at pop_cult_pod. Instagram, popcultpod, all one word. Facebook, popcultcompound. Email, popcultpod@gmail.com. I'm getting better at this shameless plugging. YouTube, popcultpod. Leave a comment on my YouTube video. Let me know what you think. A load of stuff coming up there very, very soon. And I'll probably put up some polls so we can try settle this. Let your voice be heard. Because I cannot spell cult without you. Fuck, I forgot the Undertaker again. Sorry, dude. Alright, send them, Jesus. Shout out to Gunkel for the music. Check him out at soundcloud.com/GUNKL. And while you're there, why not check out past episodes of the Pop Cult Pod at soundcloud.com/popcultpod.
The Phoenix Wrestling Network. Subscribe today wherever you get your podcast.